Hello, this is the Landscape Ontario podcast. My name is Scott Barber. Today, we are talking about what business owners can do to look after themselves. So many small business owners, they spend so much time focusing on their business, on their staff, all the responsibilities on their plates. But as we know, in order to perform at your best for your business, you've got to be in a really good place mentally and emotionally. So Grant Harrison, he's with Nextra Consulting. He joins the show to talk about this topic. Grant wrote a fantastic article for Landscape Trades magazine earlier this year on this issue, and he says something that I just love as a way for business owners and landscape business owners in particular to think about what they need to recharge and to stay well. And that's, if you work with your mind, you've got to rest with your hands. And vice versa, if you work with your hands, you've got to rest with your mind. So we're going to find out what Grant means when he says that, and a whole bunch more coming up next. All right, Grant. So could you tell us, just maybe start with a little bit about yourself and your background?
All right. Thanks, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on today. So like most landscapers that we know, that I grew up with, that we coach, I started in this industry as a summer job when I was going through high school. Worked for a local landscaper that was kind of down the road from us. Mike Beadle, he's still in the industry today and runs a great company north of Toronto. And just kind of fell in love with building stuff and ended up going to, after I graduated high school, ended up going to the Landscape Ontario Congress and just kind of seeing that, hey, this could be a career for me if I wanted to do this post-secondary. And so I ended up doing some research and attending Humber College and doing their technician program there. And I was actually good at school. Like I just graduated high school, but then when I was passionate about something, I actually get a good grade. So I did Humber College and really enjoyed that. Met some great people there, and really just able to look at that and do this as a kind of, I guess I didn't realize it was gonna be a full career where I'm at today, but I was able to do that. So at that time I was living north of Toronto in Newmarket area, ended up moving to Muskoka. And started working for a landscaper up there, Rockscape Design, and they just won an award through Landscape Ontario for their employment. And it was just great to see them and to see their culture that they have. So that was a long time ago, probably 22 years ago. And just holy cow, time flies. So I ended up meeting my wife in Huntsville in Muskoka, and we got married. We had our first son up there, and I just love Muskoka and the lifestyle that bring. But my wife's family was from London. So when we kind of had our first son, he's 22 now, and we ended up moving to London, and which was a big shock. It was a big culture shock to be living in Muskoka down to London. So we moved down to London to be close to family, and we never regretted moving here to London area, and ended up got involved with the Clintar franchise here, first as a part-time plow operator, and then I was able to kind of join their ranks full-time. So, and that was kind of the first job I ever had in the industry that was actually like a full career. Like, it was like, you could wear khaki pants and a collared shirt. They actually had like an office. Like most of the companies I worked for before was working out of the owner's home. So like actual mechanic, like full on like corporation. It was really cool to see. Got my first BlackBerry there, got my first email address. It was like, I thought I grew up like overnight. Just really kind of thought, hey, again, this is that next level that I've been looking for in my career, and do that. So after a couple of years with the Clintar franchise, I always had this feeling that I always wanted to be my own business like I wanted to own something myself. So we ended up starting a residential design build firm here in London. The local Clintar franchise owners were awesome. They were so supportive. They weren't doing anything residential design and build at the time, so they really were able to help me, support me. If I needed extra work in the wintertime, they were always happy to have me back. So it was good. So we did that for 5 years. So my wife came in and she helped me do the book side of the business and kind of behind the scenes. And then I was typical owner, working 60 hours a week, on site all day with the guys. Then, in the evenings, try to see clients and try to do estimates and just worked really hard. The first year we made a little bit of money. It was good. We went to the accountants, kind of took our books in a, maybe not quite in a shoebox, but maybe in a file, a QuickBooks file, and handed it to him and said, okay, how did I do? And we sat down whatever a month later, and he talked to me about stuff I didn't understand, overhead and percentages and balance sheet. And I just kind of shook my head and I was like, okay, just tell me, did I do well or not? He's like, yeah, you did well. So I'm like, okay, so I have a recipe for success. So second year, we put a second crew on and go back. And he's like, actually, you didn't make very much money this year. I was like, what? I'm like, I did the same success I did the first year. I worked harder. I put more guys on. I put more revenue on. Something's not making sense. Like, why does it not make, like, the profit I made the first year shouldn't have doubled the second year? And again, like, just completely blank stared. The accountants, tried to get my my banker involved, and they were just like, they didn't understand what I was trying to talk about or communicate well. So we did that for 5 years, and every year it just seemed to work harder and harder. It became more and more stress. During that time, I was really involved with Landscape Ontario. I was part of I became London chapter president. And the one thing I learned so much from the contractors that through Landscape Ontario, but the one thing I saw was that a lot of the businesses were like mine that were struggling. And a lot of times the struggle in the business ended up affecting their marriage. And a lot of the guys that I worked with, their marriages fell apart. And I was like, listen, I am not giving up my marriage for this business. Like, I just cannot hold on to that. So it became very clear at the start of our 5th year that something had to change. And it was just either my marriage and my family or the business. So we ended up shutting the business down. Just a really low point in my life. Like, just like, you know what, this was always my dream. But just the realization that, like, this is a small part of my life, right? This can't be my identity. So we shut that down. And just couldn't figure out why, right? Just kind of depleted. Ended up sending an email out to a bunch of people I knew and said, hey, listen, I'm closing the business down. I'd love to, go somewhere. Like, I want to stay in the industry because that was important to me. So ended up doing that, and then got a call from Bob Wilton, who is the owner of the franchise network at that time. And Bob said, come talk to us. We'd love to have you back in the fold of the Clintar franchise. So, I applied for a couple of jobs at couple of the local franchises, and then none of them really worked out. That's when Toronto pricing of housing was just going through the roof, and Southwest Ontario really wasn't affected. So trying to move to Toronto just wasn't going to be a factor in doing that. Now every price is going through the roof, but at that time it just seemed to be GTA. So anyway, so Bob ended up hiring me to do franchise support. And I remember going to Markham and sitting down with Bob and Terry Nicholson, and they were like, listen, I think you could do this franchise support with us. And I was like, Bob, I just closed a business down. Like, why do you think I can help other business owners? And he's like, Grant, he goes, I see something in you. The Clintar franchise, the London one at that point was pretty far ahead of the other franchises. So he says, honestly, just go in, just share your story, just share your experiences. What did you do at the London franchise? And we'll teach you everything else that you didn't know. So yeah, so Terry Nicholson was awesome, and he taught me everything I didn't know. Right, he taught me the numbers part of the game, how to budget, how to do all those percents, all that type of stuff. And I just fell in love with coaching and helping owners, and I just loved that part of it, and loved the Clintar family. At that point, after a couple of years, the Clintar franchise sold. So I ended up leaving Clintar and then working for Nathan Helder at Gelderman. And Nathan is just amazing. He's again, one of the strongest business owners that are in, because he's not a technician, right? He's a business owner first and then technician. So he just kind of allowed me to even learn the numbers better, right? And be able to do that. And then 2.5 years ago, we started Nextra Consulting. And really, we focus on giving clients, green industry owners, the help we didn't have. So when Marla and I were going through this, we were like, this is the resources we had. This is the conversations we had. This is the knowledge we had. So we're just helping contractors do that now, and even more now, right? And this is kind of why we're having this podcast, right? It's because business owners are struggling. Not with revenue, like the revenue is up for all these guys, but they're struggling with other issues. So that's really why we wrote the article in the Landscape Trades magazine, is because we truly believe that if the owner is not healthy, that the business is not going to succeed, even though the top line revenue is there, even though sales are not an issue. That, you know what, we gotta support the owners. And as Landscape Ontario has done so well in the past, and they've supported me in various different states, I think the support we have to offer owners is completely different since COVID started.
Yeah, no, and as you mentioned, that's really the impetus for one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast today, was to talk about the column that you wrote for Landscape Trades, on the well-being of owners. And it is sort of an interesting time. Well, it's a very interesting time, but it's an interesting time in the sense that, as you alluded to, many Landscape Ontario members, many professionals in the landscape and horticulture space, did really well last year in terms of business. There seems to have been, a real demand from the public, from homeowners, to invest in their outdoor spaces, which is a great thing. But we have a couple different things. I guess we have the uncertainty of everything going on and all the extra challenges in our personal lives. And then I guess the added stress of, taking on all that extra work. I guess where I'm going is, why do you think this has been such a challenging time for business owners?
So I think there's a couple different aspects. When we talk about, like, we're almost coming up to a year now, right, of when this kind of started. Actually, I was writing. I have a daily journal I wrote in, and I just remember coming back from Florida and just kind of being like, "What's this COVID thing?" Right, coming back to like an empty airport. I was like, "What the heck's going on?" Like, what happened while we were gone for 2 weeks? I would say it's been a roller coaster for the owners, right? It's just been an up and down. So the roller coaster started when, just when the government said we're going to shut down, right? And we were still in the middle of our snow season, right? So everyone agreed that snow is essential service, right? So if it snowed last spring, we were going to go out. But then the conflict came up with, but what do we do with the green season, right? And that's right away, that's where we just saw that's where we started, right? There was polarizing opinions on what was going to happen. Some people are like, no, we're going to work because I think that, lawn maintenance is an essential service. Other contractors were saying, no, I don't think it is. Landscape Ontario did an amazing job in the COVID committee, just trying to figure that out. Like, you're so blessed for that committee and just what they were trying to manage this and the constant updates we were getting. So, shout out to the committee for just how they had to do this and figure that out. But then right away it became, and then, so like, then it became, you're going into the season, you're climbing that roller coaster, the click, 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 click. In the background, we're like, we've got quite a bit of work sold. We're going to be short on staff, because that was kind of the biggest pain point from the year before. And then you crest the ridge and you're like, okay, now we have too much work. Now we have all this staff that we don't think we can do the work. So now what do we do with that staff, right? And then all of a sudden we start going downhill. And then as we get downhill, then it's like, okay, now we can get to work. So we get to work, and then we're like, okay, we think we have a good balance of staff versus work. And then all of a sudden the work just goes through the roof, right? So then it's like this, we're back up a hill again, and like record sales, like unbelievable. Like, who would have thought that we should have been going into the biggest recession our generation has ever seen, but exactly opposite for our industry, right? So then it becomes, now I've sold out my season, now I don't have enough staff. So you kind of get to that balance. And then mid through the season, then it's like, okay, now there's not enough materials, right? So again, as the owner's trying to deal with, it's like, okay, I've sold all this work, I've staffed up, but now I don't have the material to finish the job. And that becomes a logistical nightmare, right? Because this is something we've never seen before. And again, the manufacturer has done a great job to try to figure that out, make a couple less SKU lines to figure that out. But again, it's just that it's the roller coaster of an owner just trying to figure that out. And that's when we get to August, right? So we're only in August. And we were on the peer-to-peer group call for the Landscape Ontario, Jackie, the other day. And someone said, like, I felt like in August, like I do in December. Right? They were just completely burnt out. And as an owner, we take all that to heart, right? Like, we want to take care of our staff. We don't want to lay our staff off. Most of the owners I know are willing to take a pay cut and not cash their own check to make sure that their staff are looked after, because that's how much we care about it. But they're still doing with all this other stuff. So on top of just the normal logistics of, that spring rush, it's like all this other stuff. So that's kind of that. And that's really before August. So many owners were already tired before we get to the fall. Again, and then doing that. I think there was a little bit, honestly, Scott, there was a little bit of guilt. And I still feel that today. And I see that in the owners, that we don't want to complain about all the work we have, because maybe we know another person in our family that owns a restaurant, right? Or maybe we know someone in our family that works for the airline. So we don't want to sit there and say, hey, we've had such a good year, when other industries are affected so much. That does feel, I feel like the owners are taking a little bit of that guilt on as well. Like, when they say, how was your year? You don't want to say, oh, we had the best revenue ever, when someone else is like, man, I haven't even been able to operate my business in 3 months. So there's a good portion of that.
Yeah, that's a totally new sort of phenomena, right? I mean, it's just such a unique situation, but it's true. Owners, we're all seeing so many different things. As you said, you might have a business, a restaurant owner, a restaurateur, or an airline employee, and it does weigh on you when you see that in your social network, in your family, and so forth. But it is a very different situation.
Yeah. So that was like August. Again, I think most guys, again, thank goodness for the revenue. So they didn't have that pressure of doing that, but the lack of materials was definitely offering logistical issues. Again, and lots of work coming in, lots of calls coming in. Like even during August, most calls are slowing down. Like you start to see that trend. They fall off when people are on vacation. People are not on vacation. They're still spending money. And we saw probably in October, November. So every month, as our coaching clients go, we meet with our clients once a month, just the owner. And I always have 2 questions at the start of the session: is on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing personally? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing professionally? And probably up till October, I would say my average was an 8 for both, right? Like, there's always issues that are coming up. But November, I saw a huge significant drop. Like it went from an 8 to a 5. And I came home, and typically I try to do all those within 1 week. And I came home at the end of the week, and I said to my wife, Marla, I said, we have a bigger issue coming here. Like this is a key indicator that our owners are not doing very well. And then the fact came, and I think I kind of realized that there's nothing to look forward to. So some of these owners look forward to, hey, in January, I get 2 weeks in Florida, or I get 2 weeks in Cuba, or I'm going away on a ski trip with my family. And there was no opportunity to recharge, right? Typically how the owners have recharged to get ready for the spring is taken away, right? It's always, typically most of them are about travel and about getting away, turning their phone off, and just doing that, and not having that opportunity to do that, or even saying like, it's going to open up in April, so I can make it till April. They just didn't have that finish line of how to do that. And they just were like, I don't know. Like, I was tired in August. Now I'm even more tired in November, and I don't see a restful time coming up. And I think that's where most owners are now. And now we're recording this in, middle of February, and we're gearing up for spring. And most of these owners have not taken a good vacation. They haven't rested. So they're going into the spring rush, not rested from the year before, right? And those owners we've been trained to rest in the wintertime to get geared up for the spring. So yeah, so it's a big concern we have for sure.
So Grant, what are some of the things that you encourage and coach your clients on, in terms of what they can do to stay, or to get, to focus on their mental and emotional well-being?
So my wife listens to actually it was I wish I had come up with this and I hadn't, but my wife listens to a podcast of a lady in the States, and it talks about like Sabbath, which for us is like a day of rest. And the lady had said, she's like, she had really done a great job. She goes, if you work with your hands, you need to rest with your mind. And if you work with your mind, you need to rest with your hands. And I thought that was so interesting, because so many of our owners grow up in the business working with their hands, right? Like for me, I'm a technician through and through. Like my ideal day, is put me in an excavator, put me in a snowplow, and let me build something or let me plow a lot. I love that. And that's why I got in the industry, right? But now I don't, like, my kids make fun of me because I don't have any calluses anymore. Even on the weekend, we were sitting around the table. Both of my kids are in the trade. So they both make fun of me because they're like, Dad, you got office hands. I'm like, I totally have office hands now, right? And I prided myself 10 years ago that I didn't have office hands. I used to make fun of people like myself. So I need to, and I learned this even in my own business, right? I need to rest, but I need to rest with my hands, right? So I actually need to take a project on. So we're doing some renovations in the house as a project to do that, because that's how I'm going to rest. So just encouraging owners to look at that and say, okay, how am I going to rest? If I can't go to Florida for 2 weeks, how can I rest? And again, the owners have come up working with their hands, and now they're working with their minds all the time. So it's a matter of saying, okay, looking at this and say, okay, if I can't go to Florida, what am I going to do? And let's make a plan to do that. So we encourage them to do that, even to the point of, next time we meet, you need to tell me a plan. I don't care what it is, but how are you going to do that? And kind of forcing them into that situation as that goes. So the other thing that has been really important, and I do this for myself, and I think it was really good, is just a good daily routine. I have a good routine now since COVID started. It's been a blessing because I'm not traveling as much. So getting up in the morning, writing in a journal, I do some reading in the morning, having a tea, getting out and walking the dogs. We have 2 dogs. So those poor dogs have no idea what's happening in the last year, right? Like, they were used to 1 walk a day, maybe 1 walk every other day. And now they're like, what the heck, twice a week, or twice a day? This is crazy. Like, what's going on? So eating better, that's always important. So it was interesting. I was traveling last week into a client, and I had 3 meals out in one day that were like, not fast food, but out. And I was like, oh, I'm just dying for a salad, right? So eating regularly, eating better, and then trying to figure out how am I going to rest. And then getting rest. So that's the other thing right now, is just getting sleep. I think that's the number one thing. I think our world's changed our perspective on sleep. I think, like, a lot of times we prided ourselves on, oh, I'm up at 4 a.m. and I work till 10 o'clock at night, right? And I think people are realizing that the value of sleep is really important. If I don't have that sleep, I know my wife's very good at pointing that out. I always get short, and we hurt the ones we love, right? So if I'm tired and I'm cranky, I don't usually show that to a client, right? I'm usually the one. I come home and my wife gets the short end of the stick, or my kids get it, right? So, and then my wife will be like, you need to go to bed, right? You need to go to bed early tonight. I'm like, oh man, I'm like 45 now, and I still need to be told to go to bed, but I still feel so much better when it comes to that. So just holding owners accountable for that, and just saying, okay, this is the new normal. Like, you've made all these adjustments in your business, right? Look at all the different things you're doing in the business. You're doing more Zoom meetings, how you interact with clients. All these things have changed, but as how we're doing in our personal lives, we haven't changed all that much. Because we've been so busy adapting in the business life that I don't think we've adapted in our personal life enough.
Why do you think it's hard sometimes for business owners, for entrepreneurs to, prioritize their mental and emotional well-being?
I think it's hard because being an entrepreneur or a business owner is so busy, right? Like, it's just so many things. And I think we fall into the trap of, this is the sacrifice I need to make on my personal and business life in order to have a successful business, right? Like, we read magazines, we read bios, we read all these things about successful business owners. And typically there's a story of lots of self-sacrifice in the start of it, with the end result being successful. The problem is, though, is we have in the industry, I love our industry. The problem is we have guys that are still sacrificing after 20 years, right? And still have that mentality of, I still have to sacrifice my personal life. I still can't draw enough out of the company on a financial basis. I still have to work 6 days a week. I still have to do everything 20 years later, right? And that's not true, right? Like, that's the problem, is that we haven't got into that maturity level yet in the business to say, okay, I've done that sacrifice. It took me 10 years, but now I'm on that next step where I can start to draw out the money, or taking the time I need, or not feeling guilty when I have a day off, to be able to do that type of stuff. So I think that's just head trash. I think we get ourselves into, to feel that that's the way we have to do to be successful.
Yeah. And of course, business owners, by their nature are driven, determined, are hard workers. So it's just, yeah, that guilt part of taking time for themselves comes in. But as you said, I think at the beginning, and as you certainly said in the landscape trades column so well, if you're not functioning at a high level and you're not feeling good and healthy, in the end, the business is going to suffer for it. The better you are as a business owner, from a mental well-being standpoint, the more your business is going to thrive as well. So it's finding that balance, I think.
It is finding that balance, and it's finding someone that can hold you accountable for that balance, right? Like a lot of our jobs right now as coaches is just really holding them accountable for that, right? Like just checking in, and we have calls every week with owners, just like, how are you doing? How are you eating? Right. We all, when we stress, we all have a vice that we go to, right? My vice is fast food, right? When I get stressed, I eat crap. Right. So I need someone to hold me accountable. Right. And it's not my wife, because I can easily justify things to my wife. And, so I have someone that he keeps me accountable for, how am I eating? Right. If I get tired and I want to do that, like, even last night, it's kind of getting to that time of the year. It's snowy out. I was like, oh man, I could easily go out and get a Big Mac, right, at 10 o'clock at night. But I know that the next day I'm going to be for this event, right, I'd be a sack of rocks and I just wouldn't feel good, right? So just holding owners accountable for what is your vice, right? Just asking owners that, like, when you get stressed, what happens? What is that proactively? So we can take a look at that, right? And there's all kinds of vices. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Just eating crap food is what's for me. Some people it's alcohol, some people it's work, right? I'm just going to bury myself in more work, right? So whatever that vice is, find someone that can hold you accountable to that you can go to and say, hey, listen, whatever that vice is, I just need to know that I went over this week. This was not a good week for me. And that's okay, right? It's okay to have a bad week, but you got to be progressing towards that. And like you said, Scott, if the owner's not healthy, then that's what we're seeing right now. Then you can't lead your team, right? And then your team doesn't understand what's going on. You lose the direction. You start making bad decisions. You start reacting, being rather than proactive. And then eventually it hits financials, right? And then it just seems like it spirals out of control. And because it goes so slow, you don't see it, right? Like, it's just one of those things where it's been a year. Like, we've been in this system for a year now. And, so just, again, I just encourage owners to find that one person that they can talk to. It could be a family friend, it could be a coach, whatever it is. Find another owner that you trust, right? This is the great thing about Landscape Ontario, is that we have such an amazing network of owners that want to help other owners. So reach out to someone and just sit there and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And can we jump on a call, once a week, and that's really, we used to be able to do coffee. That was always my thing, right? I always be like, let's go for coffee. Right. And then it used to be, let's go for coffee and sit outside. And now it's like, we can't go for coffee anywhere. So it's like, so Zoom has become that, but a lot of our coaching has become that, just a weekly check-in, right? How's it going? What's going on? Let's not even talk about the business side. Let's just talk about how you're doing personally and keep it at that. Because I know if the owner's going to be good personally, that for us as a coaching firm, the rest of it's going to be fine, right? It's just kind of that proactive versus reactive type of relationship we want with owners. So find that person, reach out to LO. Like, there's lots of current owners that we willing to happy to take your call. So that's the great thing about the industry.
Absolutely. So Grant, I think maybe I'll leave it there, but I do want to, I guess, let everybody listening know that you have a podcast as well. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and where people can find it.
Yeah, that's awesome, Scott. So we have a podcast that goes every other week. It's called Nextra Presents, and we interview Canadian contractors, we interview Canadian manufacturers, Canadian software developers, and industry giants every other week. So really just kind of, it came out of, I have such great conversations with people, just like this conversation. And I always leave a conversation, I'm like, I should have recorded that conversation, because I want more people to hear that conversation, right? That's the blessing about doing stuff like, and that's the crappy thing about losing Congress, right? Is like so many good conversations happen. So, just to be able to say, hey, this is a conversation I have with this contractor, and I think more people could hear this, right? More people can relate to this conversation. A lot of people have this pain point. So here's a contractor that had a creative way to get, to solve that, or here's how they're doing something different. So just be able to press record on those conversations and then play that back to people in the industry that want to be able to do it. So yeah, so Nextra presents, you can go to our website, nextraconsulting.ca, and there's a link there, or any of your iTunes or all those type of things have all the launching and stuff like that. So
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat on this super important topic. There's so much there, but I think this hopefully this conversation gets people thinking. There were some really good bits. I love that rest with your hands. I've never heard that, and I absolutely love it. I guess the key there is that everybody has different ways that they recharge, right? For me, it's getting out in the woods on my mountain bike, or for some it might be going for a run. Others it might just be hanging out watching the ball game or something. Everybody has sort of, maybe they're on their feet all day, and for them their rest is just watching the Leaf game or whatever. So everybody has their different way. Find what works for you and make sure you make time for it. I think that's really the point, and I love that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Scott. I love having this conversation with you, and thank you so much for doing the podcast and just for getting this information out. And like I said, Landscape Ontario has been awesome. You use them as a resource. Reach out to someone. If you're feeling like you're struggling, there's people out there want to help you. So don't feel like you have to struggle alone. So
thanks so much, Grant.
Thanks, Scott. Have a great day.